I never understood why they never changed that school's name. Bloody Brook High. Just hearing it made your throat tighten. It wasn't just a name, it was a warning. Not just a name, but the weight of everything that had happened there, compressed between red brick walls and those windows that looked like hollow eyes staring back at you. I moved to this small town, Willow Creek, at the end of summer. My parents had this idea that small town life would be quieter and full of opportunities. Opportunities for what? Breathing mildew and listening to ghost stories? Honestly, all I found was a permanent fog that seemed to cling to your skin, and Bloody Brook High, which felt like it had been built on top of a broken promise. The building was massive. A Gothic monster, easily 100 years old. Inside, the smell was a mix of old floor wax, harsh disinfectant, and, strangely enough, a constant scent of damp earth, even on the third floor. The kind of moisture that never dries. The hallways were dim, fluorescent lights flickered lazily, and the wooden floors creaked as if the building itself resented our presence. On the very first day, I realized that school wasn't just a place to study. It was a mausoleum. I quickly became friends with Leo. He was my locker neighbor and the most cynical guy I'd ever met. He wore a hoodie all the time and was the only person who openly talked about what everyone else felt but never said. "Have you seen the gym yet?" he asked while we tried to decipher the school's confusing map. "Yeah. Looks like it hasn't been renovated since World War II. Leo laughed, but it wasn't cheerful. It was dry. "It's not just the renovation, man. It's the vibe. They call this place the Ballad of Bloody Brook High." The ballad? I'd already heard the phrase whispered by upperclassmen in corners. It sounded like the title of a bad horror movie. "So what's this ballad supposed to be?" I asked, feeling that familiar chill you get when you know a heavy story is coming. Leo glanced around, even though no one was nearby. "Sit down. You need to understand this school's DNA. It's not just a ghost story. It's the foundation." He told the story like he was reciting an old oath. It happened a long time ago, back in the 1970s. The school was at its peak, full of life, that whole era's energy. There was an elite group, the popular kids, the athletes, prom kings and queens. And among them, there was a girl named Emily. Emily wasn't just pretty. She was art. She was the star of the drama club, the lead voice in the choir. People said that when she sang, the silence was so heavy you could hear your own heartbeat. She was in love with Peter, the quarterback and golden boy of the school. Perfect couple, on the surface. The ballad, the event that gave the tragedy its name, was that year's prom. The most anticipated prom in Willow Creek's history. It took place in our auditorium, the one at the far end of the building that's always locked now and smells like mothballs. "They planned everything to be perfect," Leo said, gesturing. "Music, lights, the whole town talking about it. Emily was going to sing a song she wrote herself, dedicated to Peter. It was her gift to him. The highlight of the night. Then things went wrong. Not an accident. Not a fire. Something worse. That night, shortly before Emily's performance, Peter was caught by one of her friends, Mark, cheating on her with the head cheerleader, the most envied girl in school. It wasn't a harmless moment. It was serious, in the equipment storage room. Mark, who genuinely cared about Emily, ran to tell her. She was backstage, dressed in white, holding the sheet music. "They say she went pale as the dress," Leo whispered. "She didn't cry. She just nodded, like she already knew. And then she made her choice. Emily didn't cancel her performance. She went on stage. The auditorium was packed, everyone expecting a love song. Peter was there, smiling, unaware his world was about to collapse. She took the microphone. The music started. But it wasn't a love song. What came out of her mouth was a lament. A melody that was beautiful, but the lyrics exposed the betrayal, Peter's lies, the fake smiles of the popular crowd, the rot behind it all. She sang her pain in front of the entire town. "It was a scandal," Leo said, staring at me. People were horrified. Peter tried to rush the stage, but she didn't stop. She sang every word, right to the last note. That was the ballad. The song of ruin. When the music ended, the silence returned, but different. Heavy. Judging. Emily dropped the microphone and walked off the stage without looking back. She was never seen again. Never? I asked. Like, she ran away? No. She vanished. Completely. The police searched. Her family searched. The only thing they found was her gloves, left on the bank of the creek behind the school. Bloody Brook. The official theory was that Emily, humiliated, took her own life in the creek. But her body was never found. And after that night, the school changed. Prom stopped. The joy vanished. The place was marked. So what was the ballad? Not just the song, but the moment the school's happiness was murdered. That's why they call it Bloody Brook High, Leo finished. They say her spirit isn't trapped here, but her pain is the school. And every 10 years or so, the ballad tries to repeat itself. Something bad happens. Always involving betrayal. Always in the auditorium. Always with a melody in the air. I felt my stomach drop. So you're telling me the school is haunted by teenage drama from 40 years ago? It's not drama, Leo said seriously. It's a curse. And this year, it's a round anniversary. The year it repeats. I tried to ignore it. I came here to start over, not become part of a local legend. I'm practical. I believe what I see. But Bloody Brook High had a way of making you doubt your own eyes. I started noticing the things Leo mentioned. The auditorium, for example. It sat at the end of a hallway that was always cold, even on sunny afternoons. The door was solid wood, with an old bronze plaque turned green with oxidation. Ilara Hall Auditorium, a memorial that felt more like a grave. We had art history with Mrs. Hayes, an older teacher who seemed to carry every tragedy the school had ever seen. She was the only one who spoke openly about the past, always with a mournful tone. She told us about strange incidents over the years, unexplained accidents, mostly involving theater and music students. It was in her class that I met Hannah. Hannah was Leo's opposite. Studious, oversized glasses, brown hair always tied in a tight bun. She was the unofficial guardian of Willow Creek's folklore. Where Leo was cynical, Hannah was fascinated. You shouldn't ignore the ballad, she told me one day in the library while I searched for a book on local history. Pain is energy. Energy lingers. The ballad isn't Emily, it's the echo of betrayal. She showed me an old, yellowed newspaper clipping about Emily's disappearance. The black and white photo still showed intensity in her eyes. What happened to Peter? I asked. He left the next day. Never came back to Willow Creek. But he left his mark. The ballad is her revenge, and his mourning. It's the story of a love that imploded and took the school down with it. I started researching, not out of fear, but curiosity. I needed to understand why the people in this town acted the way they did, always tense, always looking over their shoulders. The school was the center of everything. The hallways were long, lined with lockers that felt like they'd absorbed generations of teenage sadness. And then I noticed the music. Not from radios. A faint melody, barely audible, seeming to come from the ventilation ducts, or maybe the stone itself. It sounded like a piano. I mentioned it to Leo. Oh, the piano, he said without looking up from his phone. That's her. Emily. They say she plays when she's angry. Or when the cycle's starting again. I tried to be rational. Probably someone from the music club practicing. No one uses the music room after 4. And that sound doesn't come from there. It comes from the auditorium. Her piano is still there. That was enough to unsettle me. Emily's piano, abandoned in that moldy auditorium. Life went on, but the ballad was always there in the background. Mid-year, I joined the school paper, the Brook Chronicle. It kept me busy, and honestly, let me observe the school from a less terrifying angle. And it was there, in that cramped newsroom, that we began to feel it. The repetition was getting close. Our editor-in-chief was Sarah. She was the most organized and ambitious girl at Bloody Brook High. She had her sights set on an elite journalism school, and the Chronicle was her launchpad. Sarah was dating Ethan. Ethan was the Peter of our generation. Quarterback. Team captain. Perfect smile. Everyone thought Sarah and Ethan were the perfect couple, the royalty of Bloody Brook High. They were the definition of manufactured happiness. Leo, with his razor-sharp cynicism, was the first to notice the crack. Look at that, Peter 2.0, he mocked one day as Ethan walked past the lockers, collecting back slaps and admiration. "Don't be a jerk, Leo," I said. "Ethan seems like a good guy." No one is just a good guy in this school. Especially the ones who look perfect. The ballad doesn't repeat itself without a Peter in the picture. And he was right. We were working on a front-page story about the winter formal, scheduled for 2 weeks later. The dance would be held in the gym, but the opening reception was planned for the auditorium lobby. The school administration was trying to reopen the space to honor the past. Hannah, who was helping with the historical research, was visibly uneasy. "It's a mistake," she said, rubbing her arms. "They should never mess with the auditorium. That's where the trauma is sealed." Sarah, the editor, was obsessed with creating the most beautiful coverage the dance had ever had. She wanted the article to be about the rebirth of Bloody Brook High. "We're going to show that the school has moved past its history," she declared in a meeting, that confident leader's voice of hers. The problem was that while Sarah was polishing the image of the dance, Ethan was acting strange. He kept disappearing after practice. He was always on his phone, hiding the screen whenever someone came close. And worst of all, he'd been seen spending a lot of time with Chloe. Chloe was the new girl. She'd arrived a month earlier. Blonde, wide-eyed, with that aura of someone who knows she's desired. She was exactly the kind of girl who caused trouble. And she was the substitute cheer captain. The irony wasn't lost on Leo. "See," he told me as we watched Chloe and Ethan laughing together in the courtyard. The script's repeating itself. Peter and the cheerleader. Emily and Sarah. The ballad is tuning the piano. I tried to give Ethan the benefit of the doubt, but the evidence kept piling up. One afternoon, I was in the photo lab developing pictures for the paper. It was an isolated room in the basement, and the only sound was water dripping into the developing tray. Then I heard it. But the piano. Not the faint melody I'd been noticing before. This was a heavy, sorrowful chord that echoed through the concrete walls. It felt like it came from beneath the earth, but I knew it was coming from the auditorium, 2 floors above. I dropped the photo and ran up the stairs. I reached the auditorium hallway. It was empty. The solid wooden door was closed. But the sound was unmistakable. Someone was playing an old, out-of-tune piano with desperate force. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my throat. The melody was complex, full of notes that sounded like they were crying. It was the ballad. I'd heard the original recording in the library archives, and this was the same rhythm, the same sorrow. I pressed my ear against the door. The sound stopped abruptly. Total silence. So heavy it hurt. I took a breath and turned the handle. "But, hey, who's in there?" I called out, my voice sounding pathetic in the empty corridor. "Nothing." I was about to leave, convinced my imagination was running wild because of Leo's and Hannah's stories, when I noticed something on the floor near the doorframe. A piece of paper. Not ordinary paper, sheet music. Thin, aged, with handwritten notes in ink faded by time. I picked it up. It was cold to the touch. At the top of the page, written in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting, were the words. The ballad, Emily. What froze my blood wasn't the title. It was the stain. In the corner of the page was a dark, brownish-red blot, as if something liquid had soaked into the paper. I looked around. The hallway was still empty. The auditorium door still sealed. How had the sheet music gotten out? And why had the piano stopped the exact moment I arrived? I went back to the newsroom, my hands slightly shaking. I showed the page to Hannah and Leo. Hannah took the paper with reverence, almost fear. "It's the original lyrics," she whispered, tracing the ink with her fingers. "No one has ever seen the original sheet music. It disappeared with Emily." Leo stared at the stain. "That's blood, man. That's why it's called Bloody Brook." "No, it's not blood," I said, trying to stay calm. "Probably coffee. Old ink." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The color was too specific. Too dark. "What matters is that she's warning us," Hannah insisted. "The ballad is coming back because the betrayal is repeating itself. Sarah is about to find out what Ethan's been doing." That was the moment I decided I couldn't just watch anymore. I had physical proof that the legend was real, or at least that someone in the school was dangerously obsessed with keeping it alive. I had to find out what was going on between Ethan and Chloe before Sarah got hurt, and before the ballad reached its final note. The opportunity came the following week. Winter formal preparations were in full swing. Sarah was frantic, staying late in the newsroom, completely unaware of the drama unfolding behind the football team. Leo and I decided to follow Ethan. He always went to the gym after classes, supposedly to train, but we noticed he used the service entrance that led to the storage rooms. One afternoon, we hid behind the dark bleachers. The gym was silent except for the strange echo of our footsteps. We saw Ethan go in. 5 minutes later, Chloe followed, glancing nervously around. Leo nudged me. There it is. The crime scene. The storage room was cramped, full of deflated balls and old equipment. The light was dim. We could hear their voices, though not the words. I pulled out my phone and tried to record, but the lighting was awful. We need proof, I whispered. If we tell Sarah, she has to believe us. We need to get closer, Leo decided. Reckless, but brave. We crawled along the side of the room to a small ventilation window. From there, we could hear everything. They were arguing. This wasn't a romantic meeting. It was a reckoning. I told you it was only until the playoffs were over, Chloe. Ethan whispered, panic thick in his voice. Sarah will kill me if she finds out. She's the key to my scholarship. And what am I? Just a distraction? Chloe shot back, her voice trembling. You promised you'd break up with her after the dance. The chill I felt had nothing to do with the ballad. It was the weight of that betrayal. The exact same script. A guy using love as a stepping stone. I managed to snap a photo, blurry, shaky, but undeniable. Ethan holding Chloe's face, tension etched into every inch of them. We got out of there as fast as we could. We went back to the newsroom, where Sarah was pinning up photos from the 1970 prom, the prom of Emily. She was smiling, looking at the old pictures. Look how beautiful this is, she said, pointing to a faded photo of Peter and Emily. They looked so happy. Ethan and I will be like that. My throat tightened. Telling her the truth would destroy her happiness. But hiding it would let the ballad repeat itself. Leo looked at me and shook his head. You have to show her the photo. Now. I took a deep breath. Sarah, I need to show you something. I held out my phone. The picture of Ethan and Chloe in the storage room. It took Sarah a moment to process it. She took the phone from my hand, and her smile collapsed. Her face went pale, white as Emily's dress on the night of the ballad. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She did exactly what Leo said ballad victims always did. She went quiet and let the pain soak in. Are you sure? She asked, voice low, almost a whisper. Yes, Sarah. We saw it. We heard them. She handed the phone back and stared at Emily's photo on the wall. The dance is tomorrow, she said, and there was a coldness in her voice I'd never heard before. I'll be there. I felt it, the stage being built, the final act about to begin. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at Emily's sheet music, the page I'd hidden away. Under my desk lamp, the dark stain looked almost alive. Outside, the wind howled, and it felt like it carried the piano melody with it. The winter formal was the biggest event at bloody Brook High. The school looked different, draped in silver fabric and strings of lights. But beneath the sparkle, the tension was unmistakable. Everyone could feel something was coming. Sarah arrived stunning. A dark blue dress, hair down. She looked like the royalty people always said she was. Ethan, our generation's Peter, stood beside her, smiling, completely unaware his world was about to end. He thought Sarah knew nothing. The first part of the night was the reception in the auditorium lobby. The school had opened the doors to that forbidden space, as if trying to exorcise the past. I was there with Leo and Hannah. We watched Sarah closely. She was too calm. She's not going to make a scene, right? Leo asked, uneasy. No, Hannah said, eyes locked on Sarah. She's going to do the ballad. Then came the crowning of winter formal queen and king, the peak of the night. And, of course, the winners were Sarah and Ethan. They climbed onto the small stage set up in the lobby. Sarah took the crown, and her eyes met Ethan's. His smile was radiant, the smile of a traitor who thinks he's won. The principal handed Sarah the microphone for the traditional Queen's speech. Silence fell over the lobby. I glanced at the auditorium door. It was slightly open. For a second, I thought I saw a shadow inside. Sarah began to speak. Her voice was sweet but steady. I want to thank everyone. Tonight, we're celebrating the tradition and history of Bloody Brook High. Ethan beamed beside her. Chloe stood in the crowd, watching with poorly concealed envy. And today, Sarah continued, and her tone sharpened like a blade, I want to honor this school's real history. The history of the ballad. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 50 years ago, Sarah said, looking directly at Ethan, who suddenly looked uncomfortable, a girl named Emily stepped onto a stage, dressed in white, to sing a love song. A song that became a lament, because her love was a lie. The principal tried to step in, nervous. Sarah, sweetheart, maybe we should? Sarah raised a hand and cut him off. Her focus never left Ethan. I'm not going to sing, she said. I don't have Emily's voice. But I have the words. And I have proof. She pulled out her phone and cast the image onto the big screen behind the stage. My photo, Ethan and Chloe in the storage room. Blown up, bright, undeniable. The crowd gasped. The silence that followed was deafening, worse than any scream. Ethan froze. His face became a mask of shock. You used me, and my work, to build your image, Sarah said, her voice filled with cold contempt. You're our generation's Peter. And you don't deserve this crown, this school, or my pain. She lifted the crown from her head and threw it to the floor. The sound of metal striking marble echoed. And then it happened. From the auditorium, through that half-open door, the sound arrived. Not the faint melody. The piano. But furious. And with the piano came a voice. Not Sarah's. A woman's voice, old, torn open by grief, singing the ballad. The lyrics spoke of lies, of red creeks, of broken promises. It was so real, so present, that people started screaming and backing away. I stared at the auditorium door. The shadow I'd seen earlier was sharper now, like the silhouette of a girl in a white dress. Ethan panicked and bolted from the stage, shoving through people. He was trying to outrun the music, outrun the truth. Sarah stayed on the stage, perfectly still, watching the chaos. The ballad was playing, and she was the center of the revenge. The music swelled, unbearable, and then it cut out. The only sound left was a scream. Chloe, the cheerleader, stood near the auditorium door, hands clamped over her mouth, staring at the floor. I ran over with Leo and Hannah. The white marble was stained. And it wasn't coffee. It wasn't old ink. It was red. In the middle of it lay Ethan's phone, dropped in his flight. The screen cracked like shattered ice. I looked up at the auditorium door. Closed again. And scratched into the wood was a symbol. A broken heart with a musical note in the center. Emily's mark. The ballad had played, and left blood behind. And the only question hanging in the air was, who was hurt? And who was behind the music? Bloody Brook High had just begun to sing. And I, the outsider, was standing in the middle of the first act. Bloody Brook High had just begun to sing. And I, the outsider, was standing in the middle of the first act. When silence finally swallowed the last of that cursed melody, panic erupted. The administration moved fast, like they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. They herded everyone into classrooms, claimed it was a false alarm, said the sound system had malfunctioned. But there was blood on the floor. And the kid, the poor guy who'd fallen from the bleachers, was being wheeled out on a stretcher, screaming in pain. I stood frozen, staring at the dark pool spreading across the concrete. The metallic smell of iron hung heavy in the air, mixed with sweat and fear. I searched for Emily. She was gone. Vanished like smoke. I was herded into a classroom, but my mind was miles away. I couldn't stop seeing that symbol. The circle with a slash through it. I'd seen it before, but where? That day, the school became a silent prison. No one talked about the incident. No one dared mention the music. Fear had gagged the entire building. But I was the new kid, the outsider who didn't know the unspoken rules of Bloody Brook High. I wasn't going to stay quiet. The next morning, I went straight to the library. It was an old place, thick with the smell of mildew and secrets left untouched for decades. The librarian, Mrs. Helen, was a small woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose and eyes that looked like they'd witnessed every tragedy this town had ever endured. She was the only one who didn't seem afraid of me, the curious outsider. I pretended to search for a local history book. What I really wanted was the school crest. "Mrs. Helen," I asked quietly, "could you show me the original crest of Bloody Brook High?" She sighed. A dry, tired sound weighted with years. She walked to a glass cabinet and pulled out a thick book bound in cracked leather. When she opened it, there it was. The crest. A winding creek. 2 ancient trees. And at the center, a circle. Unbroken. "What does the circle mean?" I asked. She pointed to the page but kept her eyes on me. "It's a symbol of purity. The source. They say the creek's water was pure before everything. And what if the circle were cut through?" I asked, my pulse quickening. Mrs. Helen snapped the book shut with a dull thud that echoed through the empty library. She removed her glasses and stared straight at me. "If it's cut," she said, "it means the source has been broken. Purity destroyed. That's Emily's symbol. The first one. The mark of mourning." A cold chill crawled up my spine. "The first Emily?" She hesitated, glanced around even though we were alone, then leaned in. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried the weight of thunder. "This school was built over the creek. And the creek's name isn't poetic coincidence. Bloody Brook earned its name. More than 100 years ago, she told me, there was a girl named Emily who studied here. Beautiful. Talented. With a voice people swore could calm animals. But envy is an old poison. Other girls, jealous of her talent and of the boy she loved, spread vicious lies about her. Emily couldn't take it. On prom night, she walked down to the creek behind the school and threw herself into the dark water. But before she drowned, she sang. She sang a ballad, Mrs. Helen said, her voice trembling. A song of betrayal and pain. And she made a promise. As long as lies and cruelty lived in these halls, the ballad would return. Not to bring peace, but to collect a debt. To make the guilty feel the same despair she did. The slashed circle marks the moment purity was broken. I swallowed hard. The ballad. The music I'd heard. What happened to the girls who betrayed her? Mrs. Helen smiled sadly, almost grimly. The song began to play. One by one, they suffered terrible accidents. They didn't die. But they lost everything. Beauty. Talent. Where there was envy, punishment followed. I thanked her, though my lungs felt tight. This school wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was cursed by a song. That week, I started noticing details. The slashed circle wasn't just in my notebook. It was faintly scratched into bathroom walls, carved into old desks, even etched into the cover of the choir songbook. I needed to talk to this Emily, the one still alive. I found her alone near the athletic fields during lunch, sitting on a stone bench that felt cold even in the sun. She was drawing on the ground with a piece of chalk. A slashed circle. I approached slowly. She looked up. Her eyes, always intense, were glossy with unshed tears. "You know the legend, don't you?" she asked flatly. "Mrs. Helen told me about the first Emily," I said. "And about the ballad." "The ballad isn't just a legend," she whispered, glancing around. "It's a trigger, a force that waits. And it's waiting for me." I sat beside her. "Why you? You haven't hurt anyone." "It's not about what I do," she said quietly. "It's about what they do to me." The ballad plays when the pain gets too big, when the betrayal is clear. It avenges the first Emily, but it uses the pain of the second. My pain. She told me about the constant mockery since she'd transferred here. Especially from a clique led by Veronica, the school's queen, the modern version of the girls who destroyed the first Emily. "The boy who got hurt, the one who fell from the bleachers," I said. "He was laughing at you in drama class last week." Emily closed her eyes. "I know. I didn't wish that on him. I swear. But when the ballad plays, it's like my pain takes shape and finds the person who caused it. It's the song's revenge. Not mine." I understood then. The ballad was an amplifier, a merciless judge. And Emily was the battery, the emotional source feeding the curse. You need to leave, she pleaded, gripping my arm. You're the only one not infected by fear or envy. But if you stay, the song will take you too. You're too close. I can't, I said, staring at the symbol on the ground. I need to know who's playing the music. If the song is the punishment, who's turning the record? She shook her head desperately. No one controls it. That's what they don't understand. It just happens. The school sings. The creek whispers. You heard the piano, didn't you? It's old. Out of tune. There is no piano nearby. No band. No musician. That chilled me. If no one was playing, then the curse itself was manifesting. But I'm stubborn. I'm the outsider. And I gave myself a mission: protect Emily and understand what was happening to me. I started watching her closely, tracking the cycle of pain. Veronica and her friends humiliated her constantly. And whenever it happened publicly, or with particular cruelty, the air grew heavy. One afternoon I saw it happen. Veronica snatched Emily's sketchbook, the one filled with slashed circles and melancholy figures, and tore it to pieces, scattering them across the hallway floor. Look at this, Veronica laughed. Depressed Emily drawing her own funeral. So dramatic. Emily didn't cry. She just stared at Veronica with a look of such deep despair it twisted my gut. I felt that pressure again. The air vibrated. I knew what was coming. We need to go, I said, grabbing Emily's arm. We ran, but it didn't matter. We were in the courtyard near the main entrance when the sound began. Not from speakers this time. From nowhere. From everywhere. Louder. Clearer. Like it was inside my skull. The ballad of Bloody Brook High. The piano. The slow, mournful melody. But now it was warped, like it was playing underwater. The courtyard was packed. Everyone froze. Veronica and her group stood near the main staircase. Their laughter died instantly. Veronica's face twisted, not in fear, but confusion and physical pain. The melody pressed in, focused on them, squeezing their throats. Then the lights flickered. One by one, the courtyard lamps burst with sharp pops. Panic surged. Students screamed and ran. I held Emily close, shielding her. I looked at Veronica. She tried to run, but it was like her feet were glued to the ground. The music hit its climax, a high, dissonant note. And then, Veronica fell. Not over anything. Not slipping. It was like the ground vanished beneath her. She tumbled down the steps in a violent, bone-cracking fall. When the music stopped, the silence was unbearable. Veronica didn't move. Her arm bent at an angle arms shouldn't bend. This was worse than before. The ballad wasn't warning anymore. It was punishing. I looked at Emily. She was shaking, hand over her mouth, eyes locked on the scene. I feel it, she gasped. Her hatred. Her pain. I didn't want this. It wasn't you, I said, trying to steady her. It's the school. The curse. But deep down, I knew the line between Emily's pain and the song was thinning. The curse was feeding on her. From that moment on, I wasn't just a curious outsider. I was an accomplice. A guardian of the source of an unfolding tragedy. The administration tried to cover it up again. They said Veronica slipped on a wet step. But everyone had heard the music. The ballad had played a second time. And the punishment had matched the cruelty. That left one place still hiding answers. The old music room in the basement. Abandoned. Full of dust and yellowed sheet music. I convinced Emily to come with me. She was the key. The basement was cold and damp, the air thick with mold. We crept down the creaking stairs, my phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. The music room was at the end of the hall. The door was locked, but the lock was ancient. With some effort and a bent paper clip, I got it open. Inside, time had stopped. A grand piano sat in the center, covered with a filthy sheet. But what caught my eye was the music stand. One sheet was open. I stepped closer. The paper was so old it looked ready to crumble. The title was handwritten in elegant, archaic script. The Ballad of Bloody Brook High. At the bottom, scrawled faintly in pencil, almost erased. The third act is the key. The blood song must be completed. The blood song, Emily whispered over my shoulder. That's the ending. I looked at the piano. Dusty, but etched into the polished wood was the symbol. The slashed circle. Fresh. This isn't old, I said. Someone drew this recently. I turned to her. If the ballad manifests through your pain, and it's bound to this place, then the blood song might be what frees you or destroys you. I lifted the sheet music. The composition was terrifyingly complex, but the ending was missing. The final page had been torn out. Where's the rest? Emily shook her head, pale. I don't know. I know the melody. It's in my head. It always has been. That's when the full horror clicked. The first Emily wrote the ballad, but her pain gave it life. It became something that needed to be finished to be silenced. And the only person carrying the final movement, the third act, was the Emily standing beside me. I stared at the piano. Even under dust, it felt like it was calling. You have to play, I said. Not a suggestion. The fact. You have to play the third act. If the curse is using you, only you can stop it. Emily went deathly pale. If I play, what happens? The first Emily drowned after she sang. You're not her, I said. You're a second chance. If you finish the blood song, maybe you break the cycle. We left the basement with the incomplete sheet music, knowing we'd entered the final act of something monstrous. The entire school was waiting for the blood song. But there was one more problem. That fresh symbol on the piano. If Emily wasn't drawing it, and if the ballad fed on pain, then someone, or something, was actively provoking her suffering to force the ending. I started to suspect everyone. Who benefited from the chaos? Who benefited from Veronica's fall? I remembered a boy, Veronica's right-hand man, who always seemed just a little jealous of her power. A guy named Logan. He was always nearby, watching. He was the only one who didn't look shocked by the accidents. He looked satisfied. I decided I had to investigate Logan before the ballad played for the third and final time. That night I went to his house. A huge mansion, the kind of place old money buys in a town like Bloody Brook. I hid behind a hedge and watched. The light in his bedroom was on. I saw Logan at the window. He was doing something strange. He had a phone in his hand, but he wasn't looking at it. He was staring at something on the desk. I moved closer, climbed the fence. I could see it clearly now. A small digital recorder. And he was pressing play. A faint sound drifted out through the glass. Not the whole ballad, but the beginning, the first notes of that out-of-tune piano. He was playing it. But if he was playing it, why did the music always feel like it came from everywhere? I watched Logan grab a photo of Emily, tear it into scraps, and laugh. He was actively trying to provoke her pain, her despair, so the ballad would play and hurt whoever he wanted. He wasn't the composer. He was the DJ of disaster. He was using the curse to take revenge on Veronica and seize control. A parasite feeding off the ballad. I knew the third act was about to begin. I had to stop him and make sure Emily played the blood song on the real piano, in the basement music room, before Logan triggered the final, uncontrollable version of the curse. I ran back to the school, heart hammering in my throat. I needed Emily. I needed the piano. And I needed to stop Logan before he made the ballad sing for the last time. The blood song. I found Emily in the courtyard, alone, staring up at the moon. I know who's behind it, I said, breathless. It's Logan. He's using the ballad. He's hurting you on purpose so the music plays. Emily's eyes widened. Logan? But he was Veronica's friend. He wasn't her friend, I said. He wanted her place. He's manipulating the curse. I showed her the incomplete sheet music. We have to go. To the music room. You have to play the ending. You have to finish the blood song and silence this once and for all. Emily hesitated, but whatever strength she had was bigger than her fear. She took the music. Let's go, she said, voice steady. Let's end this ballad. We went back down to the basement, to the old music room. The silence down there was heavy, almost physical. I set the sheet music on the piano stand. I'll stay by the door, I told her. You play. Play what's in your head. The third act. Emily sat at the piano. She brushed away dust and placed her fingers on the yellowed keys. She took a deep breath. And then Hal started to sing. It wasn't Emily playing. It was the school. The sound came again, but it was different now. Not an out-of-tune piano, an orchestra of grief. Hundreds of voices murmuring together, wind howling through the corridors. Logan was here. And he'd activated the third act. I heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Logan came running, recorder in hand, his face twisted between euphoria and panic. "You're not going to ruin this," he shouted as he charged toward us. "The ending is mine. The power is mine." Emily closed her eyes. The cursed melody was swelling into something deafening. The walls of the music room seemed to tremble. "Play, Emily. Play your ending." I yelled. Logan hit the doorway and I lunged at him, trying to grab the recorder. We went down hard onto the damp floor, struggling. And then Emily started to play. She wasn't reading the sheet music. She was playing the melody from her own soul, the ending of the ballad, the blood song. Her music was pure pain, but it was also pure hope. The notes were strong and mournful, but there was a rhythm that felt like it was stitching something torn back together. Emily's melody and the curse's melody collided. The sound was unbearable, a battle between ancient grief and living redemption. Logan screamed, trying to get up. He cranked the recorder to maximum volume, unleashing the ballad at full force, trying to sabotage her. It didn't work. Emily's music was stronger. When she hit the final note, high, clear as glass, the curse stopped. Not with a sharp cut, but with a long, aching final exhale. Silence returned. And the room stopped shaking. I looked at Logan. He was sprawled on the floor, gasping but unharmed. Emily looked at me. "It's over," she said. I played the third act. But when we looked at the sheet music, the paper wasn't torn anymore. The last page was there, handwritten, exactly as Emily had played it. The blood song was complete. And the old note at the bottom had changed. It no longer said the blood song must be completed. The cycle is broken. The source is at peace. We'd won. But in Bloody Brook, peace never lasts. And I still had Logan to deal with, the boy who tried to ride a curse to the top. I got to my feet, staring down at him. He didn't look dangerous anymore. Just pathetic. The ballad of Bloody Brook High had stopped playing. But what came after the silence? What would the school do now that its favorite weapon, its music, had been silenced? I was about to find out. Because in Bloody Brook, the curse might end, but the story never does. And the real threat isn't always the song. Sometimes it's the people who try to control it. The third act had been played. But the epilogue was still waiting. And something in my gut told me the epilogue would be the bloodiest part of all. I was there, down in that damp basement, the air thick with mold and old secrets, and I realized it wouldn't be fear that killed me. It would be the truth. The cold didn't come from the temperature. It came from the soul of that place. I was holding the diary I'd found, a small hardback with yellowed pages. My flashlight shook in my hand, and the shadow of Emily, the girl who'd vanished 50 years ago, danced across the wall. I'd run from the janitor. He wasn't a ghost, just a living man, terrified, desperate to get me out before the roof collapsed. He wasn't the monster. The monster was the silence. I read the last page of the diary and my stomach turned. It wasn't an accident. It never was. Emily hadn't slipped on the clock tower stairs, like the school records claimed. She was pregnant. And the father was the son of one of Bloody Brook High's founders, a powerful boy whose reputation couldn't be stained. They couldn't let her speak. That night, the night of the fall, it wasn't the stairs that killed her. It was the shove. And the school, the administration, that boy's parents, everyone, made a pact of silence to bury the truth with her. The body was never officially found, but the diary described the place, the dry well behind the old boilers, where the smell of wet earth never faded. As I read, her presence grew stronger. It wasn't just a cold draft rattling windows anymore. It was a grief so heavy the air felt like it was crying. "You saw," a voice whispered, not wind, but something that sounded like it came from inside my skull, or maybe from the cracked concrete itself. "Tell them." I looked up. Emily was there. Not a blurry horror movie shape, clear, but translucent, made of smoke and moonlight. She wore a prom dress from her era, the same one I'd seen in old yearbook photos. But her eyes were pure pain. I managed, my voice breaking. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was angry for her. I'll tell the truth. But telling the truth and proving the truth are two very different things. Then the basement door I'd locked creaked. Not the janitor. Something heavier. More deliberate. The sound of the past refusing to stay buried. I heard slow, dragging footsteps in the hall. Footsteps that didn't belong, because they sounded like hard leather shoes, the kind principals wore in the 1970s. I knew I wasn't alone down there. And the presence creeping closer wasn't Emily. It was the presence of the lie. I ducked behind a stack of broken desks, clutching the diary to my chest. My flashlight died. The silence returned, but it was an active silence, the kind that listens. And then in the dark I saw him. A tall figure, dressed like a formal ghost in a dark overcoat. His face was warped, as if rage and time had melted his features, but I recognized the ring on his finger. The founding family's ring, the same one I'd seen in the yearbook photo, on the finger of the boy who'd shoved Emily. The town legend said he'd grown into a respected man, a success story. But he'd never truly left the school. Guilt had chained him here, or maybe the building itself had absorbed him, turning him into the guardian of shame. He wasn't looking for me. He was looking for the diary. "What's written must die," he rasped, his voice a dry crunch, like dead leaves underfoot. I crawled across the cold floor, breathing in old grease and rust. I had to get out. I had proof, but if he took it, it would become just another story the school swallowed whole. Then I remembered the one thing that still worked perfectly at Bloody Brook High. The PA system. The loudspeakers used for morning announcements, wired into an abandoned control room on the 3rd floor, near the old clock tower wing. It was insane, but it was the only way out, straight back up into the heart of it. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, pounding up metal stairs that shrieked under my feet, ignoring the whispers from Emily that seemed to guide me. The dark figure was right behind me. I could hear leather saws dragging over stone. 3rd floor. I slammed into the control room door. It was small, packed with dusty, outdated equipment. I shoved it, hard, and it gave with a groan. The control panel looked like a museum exhibit, oversized buttons, weak indicator lights flickering like dying fireflies. I switched on the main microphone, the one that fed every speaker in the building, including the ones facing the courtyard and the street. Down below, I heard the ghost let out a harsh, furious sound. He knew what I was about to do. He was climbing the last flight of stairs. I didn't have time. I hit record on my phone and held it close to the microphone. I wasn't going to speak. I was going to let the diary speak for me. I flipped to the last page, the one with Emily's frantic handwriting. The words looked faint on the paper, but the mic would catch them. "Today, he told me I can't have this baby, that I have to disappear. I know what he's going to do. If you're reading this, know that I didn't fall. He pushed me. He pushed me, and the school will lie." I barely got the page close to the microphone before the door blew open. The ghost surged in, no longer a shadow, but a mass of dark, seething rage. He reached for me. Cold knifed through the air, like 1,000 needles driving into my skin. "Stop," he snarled. "You will not destroy this school's name." I dropped the diary and threw myself sideways. He couldn't touch me like a living man, but the terror pouring off him hit like a physical force and slammed me into the wall. The diary lay on the floor beside the live microphone. And Emily's voice, thin, desperate, unmistakably clear, went out across every speaker on the Bloody Brook High campus. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe 10 seconds of that page being read aloud. Maybe a little longer, with my own panicked breathing and ragged shouts bleeding into the recording as I scrambled away from the dark figure. But it was enough. The ghost stopped. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the diary. And then something strange happened. The hatred around him began to drain away. He wasn't furious now. He looked ashamed. He stumbled back. His body turned more transparent, as if the building itself was rejecting what he represented. as if the school couldn't hold the lie anymore once the truth had been spoken out loud. The last sound he made was a low, broken moan, pure condemnation. Then he was gone, burned out by the light of truth. I felt the change immediately. The air warmed. The mildew smell thinned. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was just silence. I stood alone in the control room. And outside, somewhere beyond the walls, I heard sirens. Because when I turned on that system, it wasn't just Emily's diary that went out. My phone picked up everything. The static, the broadcast bleed, the open frequencies. Anyone monitoring the right channels could hear it. I staggered out of the building. Fire crews were already forcing the fences. Police were taping off the grounds. They didn't know what they'd heard, but they knew something serious had happened. When they saw me, dirty, pale, gripping the diary, they rushed me into an ambulance. I told them the story. Of the diary. Of what I'd read. I didn't mention the ghost, who would believe me? But I handed over the proof. What came after was bureaucratic hell. A media storm that swallowed the town whole. The police had to investigate. The diary was a confession, even if it was written by a girl who died decades ago. They went to the dry well behind the old boiler room. And yes, they found her. They found Emily's remains. After that, the story of Bloody Brook High changed. It wasn't a ghost tale anymore, doors slamming, screams in the dark. It became the story of a victim whose voice couldn't be buried, not even after decades. The school was closed for good. Not because it was haunted, but because it was a crime scene, and because the shame had finally become official history. The building was condemned, and the town argued for years about whether to demolish it or leave it standing as a monument to injustice. I survived. But it changed me. I wasn't the same kid anymore, the one who broke into abandoned places for the adrenaline. I carried Emily's story with me. I never saw her again. I think once the truth was spoken, once she'd gotten the rest she deserved, she finally left Bloody Brook behind. Now, if you drive past where the school used to stand, you'll see only a fenced-off empty lot. The town eventually tore it down, brick by brick. But people still tell the story, especially the older ones. Not the old version full of cheap scares. They tell my version. The Ballad of Bloody Brook High. The story of a girl who was silenced, and the boy who, without meaning to, handed her a microphone. And every time I pass an old building, or feel that sudden chill on the back of my neck, I remember something. Not every ghost wants to hurt you. Sometimes all they want is for someone to finally listen. And that's why I'm telling you this now, so Emily's voice is never forgotten. Because the worst curse isn't haunting. It's indifference. And that, at least, we managed to break.